Okay, class, we're back to the respiratory zone, and we particularly want to talk about the alveolus. Because that's the one where the most is occurring, the most diffusion. All right. Now, we're looking at the respiratory membrane. Let's talk about the alveolar capillary membrane. Okay. The alveolus is being surrounded by capillaries. See, exchange zone to exchange zone. Remember, the capillaries were the exchange zone in the blood vessels. Don't forget that. So exchange zone to exchange zone. All right. Here is, in the wall, here's an alveolus with simple squamous cells. That's the type 1 pneumatocytes. Type 1. So I go here, respiratory membrane. Now, it's about a half micron thickness, 10 to the minus 6, about a half micron thickness between the blood and the alveolus. What do you go through? 4 layers. Alveolar capillary wall, type 1 pneumatocytes, the simple squamous. Then you go through the basement membrane. Then you go through the capillary basement membrane, and then the endothelium of the capillary. Sometimes they have the same basement membrane. So it's very thin, nice, very thin diffusion distance to go from there into the bloodstream to diffuse. Okay, CO2 goes into the bloodstream from the lungs, and CO2 comes out. Okay, so when we talk about it, we mentioned the types of pneumatocytes. Type 1 pneumatocyte, simple squamous cells. Type 2 was something called the septal cells, the ones that secrete this we're going to talk about, called surfactant. Type 3 are dust cells. Those particular cells, they just clean up things, macrophages. All right. So we go there. So what I want to talk about now is surfactant. Now recall what we said is that when the airway starts to, when you exhale, let's go back. When you exhale, remember we had that, when you exhale, okay, in the respiratory formulas, we were talking about this. Let's go back. When you exhale, these get smaller, and the surface tension starts to increase and collapse. So what the type 2 pneumatocytes do is secrete something called surfactant. Surfactant is made up of lipid and protein. Lipid and protein. What the lipid does, the lipids are amphipathic, which means they like water and they like lipid. So what you have are phospholipids on the surface. See, phospholipids, dipalmitol phosphatidylcholine. These phospholipids have this. The head of the phospholipid, remember for NP1, will fit into the water. The tail will fit into, the fatty acid tails will fit out here. So the head fits into the water and the tail's out here. The septal cells are far apart. Let me go here. The septal cells are kind of spaced out. They're secreting their surfactant. When you inhale, they get further apart and the concentration of the surfactant decreases because you don't need it when you inhale. You're making them bigger. When you exhale, though, it gets smaller and the concentration of the surfactant gets higher. And that surfactant, one head pushes on the other head, which pushes the water behind it. One phospholipid gets close to the next one. One phospholipid gets close to the next one. Okay? So the surfactant concentration, as it gets smaller. Now I want you to look at this picture here. See, here's an alveolus. And see, these little things here, assume that's the septal cells. As you breathe out, the concentration of the surfactant gets higher. The higher the concentration, the more it can push water behind it. The higher the concentration, because see, behind here would be the water layer. So the heads of these phospholipids get close. The heads of the head is the polar head that's in the water. So if the heads get close and get squeezed together, what do? Squeeze the water behind it. So water on one side cannot see water on the other. Water on one side. And then when you inhale, it gets further apart because you don't need it then. So in other words, surfactant is made up of dipalmitol phosphatidylcholine. What that is glycerol plus 2 palmitic fatty acids, and on the third carbon, a choline. Okay? So it's composed of this, a lot of phospholipids. It also, and then the other thing it's composed of is protein, and the protein component helps spread it out evenly, we'll say. Now, just to digress a moment, okay, you know, when we use the wheel in pregnancy, so we look at the last menstrual period, and that's used in, that's what we have to go by to try to determine when you're going to deliver. Now, the average time to deliver using the last menstrual period is 38 to 42. But if we use true gestational age, it's around 38 weeks, 36 to 40. Now, a kid in utero does not really start making good surfactant, really start anything much on surfactant until about 28 weeks. So one of the major things that occurs in pregnancy on preemies is respiratory distress of the newborn, which means that the kid, if he's delivered prematurely, has not made enough surfactant, and so it's easy for the lungs to collapse. Okay? So what we have to do is if they come out early, is to put them on a respirator and use a PEEP pressure. Let me tell you what PEEP stands for. Positive end expiratory pressure. Positive end expiratory pressure. What that is the respirator will not let them expel all the air. See, they keep a positive pressure inside even after you exhale. And that keeps the alveoli from getting so small they collapse. So respiratory distress of the newborn has to do, and you can read, look at the internet, has to do with primarily with an insufficient surfactant due to being born prematurely, just to bring it up. So that surfactant is a very important substance. It's produced by the type 2 nematocytes. Okay? So that's our respiratory membrane. Again, I'm giving you an overview, so read on this. All right, let's see where we go next. Okay. I won't get into this. We talked about respiratory distress of the newborns, and there are things. In class, I could talk more on it, but we're going to move on. Okay, now where we are is to look at the gross anatomy of the lungs. The gross anatomy of the lungs. All right. 3 lobes on the right, 2 lobes on the left. 3 lobes on the right, 2 lobes on the left. Let's blow this up a little bit. You can learn this anatomy. Okay, this tip, this is the apex. This is the base right down here, the base of the lung. Superior lobe, middle lobe, inferior lobe. These here are called the fissures. These are the fissures here between the lobes. Okay? Right here. All right. The lung is pressed up against the cavity, so we come next to this. We come next, so let's go here, then we'll come to what I'm going to say. So in here, we have the cardiac notch. That's it right there. That cardiac notch is the spot where the heart kind of impinges upon the lung. Hanging over that would be something called a lingula, a tongue, if we had the model. Over here, so in other words, the heart is under there making the cardiac notch, but there's a lingula, a little tongue of lung hanging over the heart. Okay? We talked about the bronchopulmonary segments up in here. So we have the lobes, and remember the bronchopulmonary segments are subdivisions of the lung. Here they are again. Okay, that's up in there. All right, we go further. So here's this here. All right, now surrounding the lung, which you would have talked about in ANP1, is something called the pleura, which is just like the pericardium, the serous pericardium. Remember, serous means wet. So what you have surrounding, that's stuck to the lung, is known as the what? Visceral pleura. Visceral pleura. Then stuck to the inside of the rib cage is the parietal pleura. So visceral stuck directly to the lung, parietal pleura out there, and then the pleural cavity is between the two, and it has pleural fluid. Just like in the heart bag, you had pericardial fluid. The pleura really kind of goes in even in between the fissures there to separate. Okay? What's the purpose of it? To allow the lung to move independently of the rest of the stuff in the thoracic cavity, just like the heart did. Okay? So we had a parietal pleura and a visceral pleura, visceral hook to the lung, viscerous organ, and then the space between the two would be the pleural cavity, just like we did with the heart there. Okay, so there we are, pleura did, thin, double-layered serosa, parietal pleura. Okay, here it is again, visceral pleura. See, I've kind of peeled it back. You can look at that picture. Okay. The blood supply to the lungs, we do that next. Okay. The lungs are perfused by two circulations, the pulmonary and the bronchial. Okay, let me explain it to you this way. The pulmonary circulation is the circulation for the body. That's the one that came from what? That came from the right ventricle going into the lungs and coming out. So go from the right ventricle to the pulmonary artery, get oxygenated, lose CO2, and then come into the pulmonary veins. Now that is for the whole body, the brain. But the lungs themselves are tissues. And they steal a little bit of oxygen from the pulmonary for their own well-being. But they also have something else called the bronchial circulation. Because I still need to take care of the pipes and everything. I got to keep that tissue in the pipes living too. Okay? So the bronchial circulation, here's the pulmonary artery, pulmonary veins. This bronchial provides systemic blood to the lung tissue itself, akin to the coronary circulation. It arises from the aorta and enters the lungs at the hilus. Okay, let me show you what I'm going to say. So coming down, here's the aorta. The aorta is going to give some little tiny branches to the lung itself. Some little tiny branches to the lung tissue itself and to the pipes. Because here would be the pipes coming down. So the lung tissue itself and the pipes is coming off of this. So I come back, then we have two circulations. The one for the body, the pulmonary, which does all this to take it to the body. And then the one for the lung itself, kind of like the coronary, to supply the pipes of the and this coming right off of the aorta going down, because here would be those pipes, the trachea and bronchi and everything. So two circulations, one just to take care of the lung tissue itself and tubes coming down, and the other for the rest of the body. That's your circulation. Okay. Now, I've already done the respiratory formula, so we're going to close right here and then start further down. Okay.